Hello there. I'm about to launch an ongoing project, and I thought I should lay out some thoughts first. See, I'm going to be narrating the Bible, a large task to be sure, and one that comes with many complications. Firstly, I should state here that I am a narrator for hire. In part, I'm doing this for practice, and possibly to advertise myself as such. If that bothers you, don't worry. I'm not going to make a thing of it in the installments of the project. That information can be found on other videos, in my channel description, my own website, and elsewhere on social media. If you like my narration and want to hire me, please reach out. If you like it well enough to follow the project for your own studies, that's good enough for me. Advertising and intended profession aside, this is a project of personal interest to me, as I will elaborate a little later. Secondly, there is the problem of selection, specifically which translation. Originally, I had intended to use one of the modern translations like the ESV or NASB, my personal favorites, but they are held under copyright by their respective publishers. I then considered the King James Version, which I grew up with, but then another idea arose, and, well, it will make the project more interesting to me. I will use both the King James Version and the douay-rheims version. For my fellow Protestants who aren't familiar, the douay-rheims is the first complete English version of the Bible used by Catholics. Its translators use the Latin Vulgate as their source, although they apparently deferred to Tyndale and Wycliffe translations, as well as the Geneva Bible at times. Again, for those unfamiliar with the history of the Bible as a text, the Latin Vulgate was an early translation from Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. And to be clear, I'm not holding the douay-rheims status as a translation of a translation against it, since much of the King James Version also qualifies. Mostly, I'm curious to see what, if any, differences I could possibly come across, and if they actually amount to anything substantial. As I said, for my own personal study, I rely on translations that use original language manuscripts as their sources, but I want to see just how much of a difference there may be between these two particular versions. Now, yes, I know that, like the King James, there is a faction of douay-rheims only people who think that Greek manuscripts were corrupted. Considering the manuscripts now available for translation actually predate the Latin Vulgate, you'll have to pardon me for not going along with that line of thinking. I prefer for a translation to be as accurate to the source material as possible, but also it should be digestible to the reader. Reading scripture does little good if you can't understand it, but, perhaps you get points for trying. In any case, I am also of the strong opinion that, due to the complexity of translation itself, one would best be served by reading from multiple translations instead of a single one. No matter how good a translation is, no matter how accurate, more than one needs to be read to get a more complete understanding of the source material. After all, one could be a very accurate verbatim translation, and the idioms and cultural style of writing will be lost on the reader and lead to confusion. But a very accurate translation that translates such things into the target language will also lose insight into the times and cultures being read about through the loss of such expressions. So for me, personally, this project will grant me the Latin filter of understanding how Christendom in the early centuries understood such things, versus the more direct understanding granted from translations of the original language manuscripts. Thirdly, there is the problem of what was marked in the King James Version as the Apocrypha. Out of those 14 books, 7 of them had been recognized at the Council of Trent as a deuterocanon, or a secondary canon. I guess the remaining 7 were left as apocryphal. Anyway, even various popes opted to prefer the shorter canon of 66 versus the longer, and people will go back and forth about the matter for centuries to come. Now, my opinion on that doesn't really matter to anyone except me, so yeah. All that to say, for the purposes of this project, I will include the Deuterocanon, including the additional portions of Daniel. Yes, the Latin Vulgate apparently has extra stuff in Daniel chapter 2 and additional 2 chapters that weren't in the Hebrew version. I'm curious to get to them, but all in due time. If possible, I will try to track down the King James Version of the Deuterocanonical texts to keep a balance going. Fourthly, style. Having just myself and no production budget, I'm not going to attempt to add music or sound effects like some dramatized translations now use. I'm not even going to attempt to do character voices, as there are far too many people recorded in the Bible, and I just don't have the range of 2,000 to 3,000 voices. I will aim for just a clean, static narration. Now, when it comes to dialogue or the epistles, I will attempt to emote in whatever way seems to best fit the tone of the text, but otherwise, I'm going for a good, clean reading. I will do a recording for a chapter at a time and ideally upload both versions of that same chapter on the same day. I will also organize running playlists of the books separated by version for those who just want to listen to one version or the other. Fifthly, commentary. No, I'm just going to narrate it. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a historian. I do layman studies for my own curiosity, but I don't quite have enough insight into all of that to weigh in on anything to any degree that would be worth anyone's while. However, I will leave the comments open for people to discuss with one another. If there's a particular question I could answer, I may try, but otherwise, I just ask that y'all try to keep it civil. I know, it's YouTube, and I'm uploading hotly contested Protestant and Catholic translations of the Bible onto the same channel. Civility is a tall order, but still I must ask for it. Anyway, I'll be attempting to post as frequently as possible so this project can be done, hopefully, within the next 5 years. This will, of course, be limited by any other recording work I get contracted to do and life in general. Perhaps when I reach the end of it, I might see about finding another public domain translation or two to keep it going, but only God knows if I'll even reach the end of this version. So, to recap, I'm a narrator for hire, doing this for advertising, practice, and as my own personal passion project. I'd rather do a modern translation, but I have to keep it public domain due to publisher copyright issues, so I'm going with the douay-rheims and the King James. The Deuterocanon will be included, though I am personally not Catholic, for the sake of completion and because it will likely prove interesting. Clean, simple narration with playlists organized by book and version, just narration, no commentary within the videos, and listeners are free to discuss in the comments nicely, please. Alright, we're all clear on what this is and why? Good. Without further ado, let's get to it.